Welcome to Let's Chew the Gum. I'm your host, Protocol. We're talking about a lot of things in this show while we chew the gum. And as always, on each and every show, we always have
something for your mind. Something for your mind. Something for your mind.
정신을 집어넣으세요. 어떤 건 필요합니까?
Something for your
정신을 집어넣으세요.
mind.
정신을 집어넣으세요.
Something for your
Welcome back to this latest episode of Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z while we chew the gum. Some folks say, why would you chew gum and talk? That's rude. Well, I've always thought that chewing gum gives you a sense of rhythm, a sense of focus, and so I like to chew the gum when I talk. So I invite you to do it as well. This is Let's Chew the Gum, as I said. I'm your host, Protocol. You can find us on most podcast platforms, including iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now. Feel free to always email us at letschewthegum@gmail.com for show suggestions or to be a guest. Today I have two special guests joining me to discuss some of the current events that are happening within our country right now and really around the world. We've had a wave of injustice just on the heels of folks being quarantined because of COVID, and it's just been something else to look at. And I've listened to individuals from around the world chime in on this topic, but I specifically today wanted to bring in some individuals who are younger than myself and who are potentially the future leaders of our country and whatever movements we have. Today, I'm glad to have, first of all, Kimberly Galindo, who graduated from the University of California, Davis with a bachelor's in Chicano Studies. She did research in the mental health of undocumented immigrants and was a research assistant for UC Davis. She's currently a community organizer for Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice in the High Desert. Let me first say welcome to Kimberly Galindo. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so very glad to have you join us today. Let me go ahead and introduce my second guest. My second guest is a phenomenal young man, Christopher Williams, who is a young activist in the high desert region of California. Christopher is also the founder of Williamsville. It is an organization or business that's focused on inspiring and informing people around the topics that we face and the issues that we face in society every day. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you both. I'm really glad to have you both. You know, I'd asked you guys to be on the show because I really wanted people to get the perspective of some young, brilliant minds from two individuals that I happen to know are highly involved in society and our affairs within the community. And you know, this show is not scripted. I don't have any scripted or pre-written questions for you. I just really want this to be a raw and natural conversation to talk about, you know, your experiences of what you're seeing, why it's happening, what's going on, what can we do? And so I guess I'd really just like to start with you at that point. So let me ask Kim to chime in first. Kim, can you just speak on some of what's happening right now?
So, since I grew up in the high desert, I lived in Apple Valley basically my whole life. My parents migrated from Mexico and brought me here as a young child, and I think it's important to highlight what's really happening with the Black Lives Matter movement, and especially being Latina and understanding that race and discrimination isn't just about white against blacks. It's also in the Latino community. You have Dominicans, you have Haitians, you have Puerto Ricans and Cubans who essentially look black and are discriminated against in the Latino movement. And we don't really talk about that often in this Black Lives Matter movement isn't just about Black people in the United States, it's worldwide. If you have noticed in the news, it's not just the 50 states that participated in this movement, it's 18 other different countries as well, and we have to really acknowledge that because racism is worldwide. It isn't just in the United States. Is the United States the biggest in the racism? Yes, I think so. But it's important to highlight that racism is everywhere, and especially in the Latino community as well. What's happening now is it's always been happening. What happened with the Rodney King, the riots, it's been happening even before you were born. It's just the problem is that the systematic oppression hasn't changed, and the system wasn't made for us. It wasn't made for the people who are a minority in this country. The system was built to keep us oppressed, and we must remember that as well when we talk about the systematic oppression and the system, and people are like, well, the system has to change. The system has to be demolished altogether because the system wasn't made for anybody but Anglo-Saxons, really. So, I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement is just a tip of the iceberg of what's really happening, but it's a big problem that's happening as well because I work in the Adelanto Detention Center, and I can see that people who are immigrants from African countries, such as Cameroon, Haiti, they have a much higher bond than those of Latin American countries. And nobody talks about that. And I've been saying this, that why are they getting such bigger bonds? I don't understand it. Most of the people who come and who are detained inside Adelanto have no criminal record. They're seeking asylum, which is legal, and many people don't understand that. And then there's different forms of system of oppression as well. And we really just have to acknowledge that. And what's happening now is I hope good change comes from this. And I hope that young people start to vote and use their voice, because this is what's been missing. The ones who do vote are always older white people, and that's why they have so many good benefits. So it's time that the younger people vote to abolish student debt, to make racism a public health issue, because it is, and nobody talks about these issues until now, and it's in the front page. And it was yesterday, Apple Valley had their rally, and I had to work, but I drove by during my lunch, and it was mostly white people, and I was shocked, because if you know Apple Valley is a right-wing conservative town, and so it was really nice to see young white people stand up for their fellow Black people. So it was really nice to see that. But I just hope change does come from this, and we start to have conversation about race and injustices and the systematic oppression that the system wasn't made for us. So that's my rant. Hope that answered your question.
No, it went above and beyond, and I'm not sure if I had a question or just a require. I don't know, but you went above and beyond, and I appreciate it. You know, Christopher, I know you had a chance to listen to Kimberly right now, and I also know that I've had a chance to listen to some of your information that you've put out, Christopher, and sort of not necessarily your agenda, but your desire to see individuals get involved. I know Kimberly talked about having a bond and public issues and racism as a public health issue and whatnot. What are your particular insights, Christopher, that you've had on this in these last, I don't want to say few weeks, but just in general?
Yes, I think I come to this position. I was raised by older parents, very church going. So it's no surprise that we end up in this community, which is, as Kimberly said, a very conservative town. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about what I would say the other side, because I'm a very centrist type of person, even politically. I'm focused on sensible changes. Like, you know, I'm not about a revolution. I think that our country is a great country. I think that we've had a lot of mistakes, but we have gone about them in the right way in terms of trying to fix them. every generation has that moment of trying to change what's happening in the country. So when I look at it from a completely different perspective. I listen to conservatives. I don't argue with them. I don't, try to, I don't correct them when they're quote unquote politically incorrect. I listen to them. I've been listening to their mentality since, honestly, I was in middle school, because I've been very interested and involved in these issues since I was, 7, 8, when Obama was elected. I remember sitting on my living room floor playing with cars, and I just am looking in awe at my television screen as Barack Obama walks out with his black family, and the lights are flickering and everybody's cheering. And I look over at my mom and she says, "You could do that." And that moment changed me completely. My father has always instilled in me that you can do anything as long as you put your mind to it. And both of my parents have been very outspoken in that way, that you're not held back by racism. However, they have been very clear. They've had to talk with me about how to be respectful, about how to respect authority, and about how to not get yourself in situations that could that they could use against you. And so I've taken both the experience of being black, and particularly being black in a racist community. Let me rephrase that: in a community where there are a lot of people who look down on these. Let's say it like that. I've had a lot of incidents with children in school. I've had a lot of incidents with adults where they, in fact, I'll tell you this, our introduction into this community, and as you know, 13 years ago, if you've lived here any amount of time, it's completely different. We are continually progressing in terms of the number of people and the amount of projects and things that we have here. But we were going up Sitting Bull Road. In fact, Sitting Bull Academy, of which I attended my first 8 years, didn't even exist in 2003 when we came here. We were going up that road, and the pickup truck is coming down the other side, and they say, "Go back to Africa," N-words, and they call it out in the back of their truck. So that was our introduction, and that's the experience I come from. And when I listen to a lot of conservatives now, I think there is a way to bring our country together behind these issues. And I'm particularly laser focused on police reform now because of what happened to George Floyd, and because I see such an opportunity to really bring this country together. But I think liberals are going to have to, face some hard truths. And I think we're going to have to, I think we're going to have some very tough conversations. And that's why I'm here. That's why I've decided to speak out on my social media platform. And I just hope that we can move forward together. And that's really my message.
Very, very well understood. You both bring up very great points, and your portrayal of society and what's happening is spot on. It is difficult, no matter if you are liberal, conservative, or left to the right of either one of those, or in between, because it's especially not just in the United States, but the world in general. Kimberly, you spoke about the world in general. There's so many people from so many different perspectives who've been brought up in so many different ways. And I was listening to, I think it was LL Cool J. Sometimes I'm tuned in with his post that he has, and it was a frustrating situation because folks wanted him to, from his perspective, they wanted him to encourage looting or rioting or just to be okay with it. And he was making the point that, it takes more than that. We have to look at things from different perspectives. And I also understand individuals who are frustrated because they've sacrificed and they've given so much, and they've, walked across those shards of glass to sort of reach a hand out to someone that may be an opponent or a foe, to extend a hand to try to work and be cooperative, and they were shunned, or they were put down, or they were called the N-word, right? And so how many times do you have to do that, right? So it is important, and I like your point, Kimberly. You were saying it was so encouraging to see the particular population of individuals that were out there. What can we do, knowing the fact that people sometimes are polarized politically, people are polarized ethnically, what can we do, Kimberly, or what approach might be one that works where everyone can come to the table in a sense and everyone gives a little bit and no one leaves feeling like they were left out?
I think this is a great question. I remember I read a book, I forgot the name, but it was Politics Polarized or Polarized Politics. And I think Christian did make a good point. I think when you listen to the other side, whether you're liberal or conservative, moderate, whatever you want to call yourself, I think it's important to listen. I think people right now are listening to reply right away. If they see something that they completely disagree with, they'll type right away, and they listen to yourself first before you respond, and then ask yourself, do I need to respond to these people, whether you disagree with them or not? And I think people are polarized from the color of their skin. I know I was born in Mexico, and I'm very light skinned, and I have privilege. I carry that privilege with me because I don't look Latina. I don't look like I was born in Mexico. But then when you talk to me and then you get to know me, it's very different. And so you're polarized if you're dark skinned, you're polarized if you're light skinned. But I think right now we need to emphasize that people have been polarized based on their skin color that has been dark. And I'm going to say this over and over again. Racism is everywhere. It's in the Latino community. My sister married a Dominican man, and their baby came out beautiful, but yet my family doesn't think that he's beautiful because of the color of his skin, and they think that other cousins of mine who are very light-skinned are more beautiful, which is weird to me because it's the color of your skin. It shouldn't determine whether you're beautiful or not. And so people are going to be polarized. Even if you're a liberal, you're going to be polarized and be called a snowflake. And I mean, I'm very left-wing, very liberal, very free, like show your flag. I don't care, but I have friends who vote for 45, and I respect them, and they respect me, and I respect everyone's different opinions. But I think labels now are so negative and wrong that people, when you say you're liberal, people assume that you're a snowflake, or when you say that you're a Trump supporter, people assume that you're racist, which might not be wrong, but I mean, see, like I'm even polarized because I think that 90% of Trump supporters are racist because that's what I think. That's what I have seen. That's what I have witnessed. That's my knowledge. This is my epistemology that I carry with me. Have I been called derogatory terms? Of course I have. And especially with the job that I carry now, I have to go to Adelante City Council in front of them and do public comment. And then you have the Trump supporters who are there basically calling you derogatory terms who look more ethnic than I do, which is kind of like a mind twist if you really do think about it. But I think that this country is very polarized, and people are going to be like, well, it's the liberals' fault, or, oh, it's the conservatives' fault. It's both of our faults because we don't listen to each other. We just listen to reply. We don't listen to listen. And this is a problem that we're having. And I think that Congress should have a term limit because some of them have been in there for like 40, 50 years. They make a career out of it. I don't think politics should be a career. I think politics should be for the people. And do I think that liberals and conservatives are sometimes wrong? Of course I do. Of course. But, I mean, the United States is very polarized, and the United States has a lot of problems. And have they always dealt with them correctly? No. But as a country, you learn from it and you grow, just like Germany did with the Nazis. It's taught in the history books of what happened. They don't erase it. They teach it. Just like in elementary school, how come we didn't learn about the Japanese concentration camps that we had here? There were some not nearby from Apple Valley. But yet we do not learn from our mistakes. We do not teach the kids our history of our mistakes that we once did as a nation. We do not do that. And we should. And I think it starts with education and having a conversation about everything that we have done, good and bad.
Absolutely.
So, yes, we are polarized.
Absolutely. No, I relate to that very well. You know, as a history teacher, I definitely relate to that. And as you were speaking about the polarization, I was just thinking of how I discussed that in my own classrooms as to a lot of the problems we have is because it's not being taught or people don't know. Right? People don't know why do I hate this person or this group or why does this group against this group? But when you start to elucidate that in a classroom or in history and students start to find out why things are the way they are, then they can make informed decisions as to, do I want to continue on this pathway of being divisive or hateful or thinking the way that I thought? And if they don't, at least they have made that informed decision and a choice as well, as opposed to it being something that, it's because my mother or my uncle or my father. People have to be able to be given information and to be able to decipher those things on their own. And, it's one of the tenets in my classroom, and I've told parents and administrators over the years in my history classes at the high school level, we talk about everything, all the low down, dirty, disgusting, terrible things in history. We don't sugarcoat it, because students that come into the classroom, there's a multiplicity of ethnic groups, academic level, ability levels, and all of them are valid. They all bring a history and a story. They all bring their family's history and a story. And the classroom is, for me, is a safe place for them to not only exhibit that, but also to learn from others to be able to modify that. And so we talk about it. And because what I found is when we're talking about it and discussing it in a safe environment, and my classrooms are safe environments, when we do that, there's less chance that there's going to be a fight about it outside behind the grocery store or across the street or on social media, right? We find effective ways to communicate, to be able to disagree respectfully, right? And agree in happiness, if so be it. But I think that is a key. And that goes for the issues of racism and colorism. There's reasons why that happens. Right? There's reasons why that happens. And if you're just born into that and you don't know, you don't know. But once you know, now you have a responsibility. And that's the key. Once someone becomes educated and now they know and they still continue to make those choices, now that's when there's a problem. So I've never blamed anyone who was racist. I've had people that were racist towards me. I've had people call me certain names that I don't care to say here. I've had people tell me that they said that because that's just how they grew up. That's what they knew. And first I didn't believe it, but then I realized it was true. And so we communicate and we talk. And now once you know, you're able to use that information more effectively. And if, again, as I said, to reiterate one more time, once you know, and then you continue on that path of negativity or divisiveness, now we can deal with you in a different way. Any thoughts that you have on that Christopher? Where do you see this progression that we're talking about? You spoke about the high desert. What else is needed to occur? I know you spoke about police reform. Kimberly spoke about electoral reform with term limits for Congress. For the young people that are listening and that you're in contact with, what messages are you sending to them to help them to navigate or to make sense of all this?
Yeah, and so one of the ways I think we can unite is through the labels, shedding the labels. Kimberly talked a lot about the labels, like not just liberal and conservative, but even, excuse me, the notion that, Trump supporters are racist. And I remember Hillary calling his supporters, half of them are in a basket of deplorables. And of course, the media only played that part, but then she went on to describe the fear and anxiety of the other half who do not understand what's going on in our country and do not know where to turn. And, if she would have stuck to that second half instead of the first half, we would have been great. I think it might have helped her in some way become president. But the fact of the matter is that these labels, that's what is ruining unity at this point. We cannot, if I were to say that 90% of Trump supporters are racist, I would not immediately at that point, they quit listening to me. They don't trust me anymore. And being in the middle, as I am, I view that as atrocious. I think we have to not only be receptive, but we cannot expect other people to shed their biases. And we're so, woke, and we're so for people being educated about, colorism and racism. But when it comes down to them and their beliefs, then racism, that is, I think, one of the most hateful words you can put on somebody, a label that you could put on somebody. I'm very, very, very careful as to when and how I use that word, because if you really hate somebody, that is a term of hate in and of itself. And so we have to be very mindful the way we speak to each other, the way we label other people, the way we label the people that disagree with us. Kimberly said it correctly. We have to listen. We have to listen to other people, and we cannot just take their words and figure out a way to, okay, how do I come back to that? We have to understand their perspective and where they're coming from, and then say, okay, how can we meet in the middle? And so particularly as it relates to labels, I think even with, and I'm going to go back to police reform because I want to really focus on that issue right now until we get that solved. All lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. Now, liberals are so quick to, well, let me explain to you why you shouldn't be using all lives matter. Instead of saying, you know what, you're right. When the person says blue lives matter, you know what, you're right. And Black Lives Matter too. And you know what? Here's how we can ensure that all lives matter, is if we remove fear from the equation. And right now, police officers who get up every day risking their lives to protect the communities that they serve, they are fearing their lives too. They are helping, and in fact, this entire atmosphere in this country is lending to their fear and building up their fear. And they have a right to fear, first and foremost, because they're fighting crime. So they have that to fear in and of itself. But when you add on racial tension, that's even more fear. And then we blame them when, I thought I seen a gun and they didn't have a gun. And then on our end, the history, and I think this is, you said it perfectly clear, educating other communities about different community struggle. My mom talks about me going out and be safe and pray very much because I want you to come back home. That's a fear. I go out and you know what I do? I have a cup holder that right in front of my car. I put my registration papers there, my insurance card, and my driver's license there every time I get in my car. So I don't have to be digging for anything if I was stopped. That's fear. We have to remove fear from the equation. But the only way we can do that is uniting people. And so if you want to say all lives matter, you know what? That's right. All lives do matter. Come join us. I believe Black Lives Matter. That's right. Blue Lives Matter. That's right. Everybody, let's come together and let's have a real agenda. And particularly, I have not done all the research, and so I'm not particularly, I don't want to say anything right now in terms of specifics, but I will say this in general. I've heard a lot about body cameras. Does every law enforcement agency have body cameras to ensure accountability and transparency? Does every law enforcement agency have implicit bias training? See, but if we can get the other side to say, hey, I'm not against you. I'm not against police officers. I don't hate police officers. I want to make sure that our communities are safe, to remove fear from the equation, then they'll listen. And that's the key, is getting the other side, whatever side we're on, getting that other side who may disagree with the tactics that are going on, because there are a lot of subcultural wars going on, like kneeling for the flag, kneeling during the national anthem. Does that matter? No. Colin Kaepernick's kneeling did not save George Floyd's life. But you know what? We're having a debate over whether or not that's true activism, whether or not he should have gotten fired. That's a sub-issue. Just like this sub-issue about all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. It's a sub-issue. We're not talking about real solutions. That is what is getting in our way. And so my philosophy is to remove all of that from the equation and say, you know what, you're right. I believe that we need to do everything we can to get officers to have more trust in their community and get the communities to have more trust in the officers in which they pay. That is how we bring the country together. And so I'm sick of the divisive rhetoric. I'm sick of these side debates that is getting in the way of progress. And that's my message to young people. Be receptive, listen, shed the labels, be open-minded, and let's really get this country on the right path. But you know how we do that is looking at each other as Americans. And I know that this is an international issue, but right now I think to solve racism in America, we have to nationalize it. And this is about the greatness of our country. This is about the love of our country. This is about the unity and humanity of our country. And we can do that together. And I believe that Trump supporters, I believe people that, posting All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter can actually be receptive. I think they want to come together, but they're not going to come together if we have signs out here that says F12. Come on now. Cops are pigs, seriously? It's divisive, and it's pushing other people away that could be coming in and joining forces. And I'm sorry for ranting. I don't know when to stop.
No,
but that's my position on it.
No, it's okay, and I don't consider it a rant. I wanted to have this forum with both of you, and I'm welcoming others who are listening. And let me just say right now, you're listening to Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. You can find us on most podcast platforms, including the one where you're listening now. We ask that if you are listening and are enjoying what you're hearing, please share it with a friend, and let's help push some of the agenda and the topics that my guests today are talking about. Kimberly, you and Christopher both were, a key word I keep hearing you both say is listen, that people need to listen. And I asked Christopher, what is it that young people can do? How do we move this agenda to where we have coalitions, to where we have community accountability, to where we are feeling safe to maneuver through our neighborhoods, where we can eliminate the colorism that you're speaking about in the Latino community. What would be your message to young people? How can they be of assistance in this issue?
I think that I mean, Christopher, can I answer some of your statements that you've said? Is that okay?
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So, I do see where you're coming from, where people say all lives matter, and then someone's like, oh, well, Black Lives Matter. I think when people use the term all lives matter, it takes away from the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's to me it's very rude, because I'm all for all lives. Trust me, I'm an immigrant. I'm all for them. I'm all for all lives. But at this particular moment in our history, in our time, we need to highlight Black lives, and not just Black lives that were lost too, but also police brutality that has been lost. There was a man in Arizona who was shot in 2017 by a police officer who was crawling to him, and he was shot on the ground. And the police officer was charged not guilty, and that man was white. And so it's Black lives, but it's also about police brutality. And when you talk about police reform, you talk about body cameras. You weren't too sure if all police stations or the sheriffs or the highway patrol or even local officials, local police stations have body cameras. Sometimes they don't. And then if they have the training, they do get training, but it's not like training where it's systematic of racism. Some of them do, and then some of them not so much. I mean, when you talk about California, Californian cops do get more training, but let's talk about Kentucky cops. Let's talk about the South. The rich history there, that racism was there. I mean, the training isn't there. And it's not just the training, it's also the lived experiences of these cops and these people. And then you spoke about how you have to have your registration and your ID in the middle of the glove compartment. And you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to have something close by just in case that a cop might think that you're getting in your glove compartment, and they're gonna be like triggered, you know. And so it's police reform. It's a huge topic, and it really does need to be talked about, and it should be a nationwide topic. And I mean, California, we're always the first ones to do something great, and then the nation follows. So, I mean, I'm looking at the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and their sheriff, the head sheriff, Banco, and I forget how to pronounce his name, but I'm looking at him, and I'm trying to see what his next moves are, because so far, I don't know. They're pretty questionable, and I have family members who are cops, and of course, I fear for them, just as I fear my family members who are out there protesting. And you are right, it is divisive when people have signs that are derogatory towards the cops, but it's also divisive when people say all lives matter during this movement, because we're not saying that that other lives don't matter. Just at this particular moment, Black lives need to be highlighted, and the police brutality that has been lost, and it comes with all the races too. It's not just Blacks that have been shot by police, it's the white men that I spoke about in Arizona. And it's sad that we even have to have this conversation in 2020, because honestly, this conversation has always been talked about, always. And
if I may just chime into something that you actually stated, and you just mentioned it. You talked about how we need to focus on the Black lives, right, that are being lost at the hands of officers. And literally the next sentence you talked about, well, it's not just only Black lives, it's also the white man. In fact, what about Kelly Thomas? Are you familiar with Kelly Thomas?
Not at the moment.
We should be. He was a LA homeless man, a white homeless man who was killed by law enforcement a few, maybe 5 years ago. And you know what? Black people weren't out in the streets protesting against police brutality, and it was all over the news. But when it happens to a Black man, and look, I understand it because of the history, but my thing is, why can't we stand up for everybody who is a victim of police brutality? Why does it have to be? And I get the statistics, I get that, but let's look at it, because I think it's easier to bring people together if we look at it from the issue of Americans are doing this to other Americans, and let's find some solutions to make sure on the preventative end this doesn't happen. And we can do that through the training that you mentioned, that I mentioned, that is kind of widespread, that even, well, I don't want to get political, but even that the Obama administration recommended, and they started it actually, ironically, in the Minneapolis Police Department, and that was scrapped when Trump came into office. But again, that's political, and I don't want to get divisive on that, but I'm just saying those are some of the issues. But the reason we can't get to those issues is because if they're saying, if a segment of the population, which again, the government is about coalition building. To succeed, you have to build coalitions. And if half the coalition is saying, well, here's the problem I have, you're over there making it about race. Okay, we cannot make it about race, because you know what? If somebody like Kelly Thomas, who was white, I would be out there too, the same way I am for George Floyd. If it would happen to an Asian man, if it would have happened to a white man, if it would have happened to a Hispanic man or a woman, I would be out there too, because it's not about race. I think there is even though there are statistics that show that there is discrimination between officers looking down on minority communities, if it was somebody of a different race, does it make it less right? Does it make it less wrong, let's say it like that, for a police officer to take their life? No. So for the sake of unity, for the sake of actually achieving progress, can we take that issue out of the atmosphere? So now if it's an organized movement against what we're for, and they're saying, well, we can kind of needle them on this since they're saying Black Lives Matter, we'll say all lives matter. And then if we say, well, you know what, you're right, we need this reform for everybody, because if your daughter was out there and got treated the same way, we wouldn't want that to happen. Then what's the comeback to that? What's the issue with that? Oh, well, you're right. No, you know what? You're right that police officers, their lives do matter. We want to make sure that they're safe, just like the communities that they serve. Now what you're going to say? Now what are you going to say? Oh, okay, you know what? Maybe I can be receptive to the solutions that you're presenting. And that's my issue. It's not ignoring what's happening to our community. It's about saying, you know what? It's happening in our community, and if it would have happened to anybody, I would be out here because I don't want this for any American. I don't want this for any human. And they don't have anybody who's in opposition to that, then we know their clear motive. But I can't say to you that I believe that everybody that says all lives matter is racist or is against the notion of police officers killing black people. They're just saying, look, I don't want officers killing any person. Okay, cool. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that because you know what? If that helps us get to progress, then I know that my black life is going to be saved and maybe other lives are going to be saved that would be taken otherwise. So that's my issue with that. We cannot be sensitive and really politically correct to the point where we're pushing people away because you don't understand. Well, maybe they do understand. Maybe it would be easier actually to educate them if we accept that, yeah, all lives do matter. And I'm for that. And I'm with you. I hear you on that. So look, how do we come together on this? And that's my thing. You're looking at it from an issue. Well, I'm immediately at what did you say? That it's frustrating to you, or that you see it as an act of discrimination when they say all lives matter. Please.
I said that it takes away from the black lives that when someone says all lives matter, it takes away from the black lives that have been lost. And then the reason why I brought up the Arizona man who was shot, and we can talk about race, but I'm saying that it's beyond, it is race. And African American people in this country do get discriminated more against than any other race. I do see that. I do. And understanding the statistics behind it, it's numbers. It's all about the numbers game. If one group of minorities gets pulled over or gets shot at or gets discriminated against, then there has to be something more. And then I brought up the white man who was shot in Arizona for police reform because that's what you wanted to talk about. So I'm going beyond this conversation of opening it up to, I see where you're coming from, that, okay, saying all lives matter. So I brought that up. But I will stand by my statement that when someone says all lives matter, it does take away from the systematic oppression that African Americans or people of color in this country, mostly black, do face in this current moment. And so this conversation needs to be half of the race, the systematic oppression, the numbers that they are more higher risk with getting shot at by police officers, and then we can talk about police reform. Because if we don't talk about this issue beforehand, then talk about police reform, it's just kind of going to be like, okay, where do we go? Or what do we do? So, it's a piece to the puzzle. We need to listen to each other. I hear you. I'm listening to you. By no means do I think that people who say all lives matter are racist. No. I said that people who say all lives matter at this current moment is taking away the black lives that were lost and the systematic oppression in this country. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that other lives don't matter. The man who lost his life in Los Angeles, the homeless man who was white, his life mattered. The Arizona man, his life mattered. The two police officers that were shot, I think one up north, their lives matter too. Everybody's life matters. I'm not saying that nobody's lives matter. No.
And I think
great point. I'm sorry. I need to just stop for a quick break for our sponsors. You're listening to Let's Chew the Gum. We are having such a dynamic and insightful conversation that we've gone this far without a break, and I apologize, but we'll be right back.
Something for your mind. Something for your mind.
Today's episode is sponsored by Instagrad 2020. Instagrad 2020 Instagrad 2020 was started in March, just after the COVID-19 shut down all schools. When schools were scrambling trying to figure out operations, Instagrad 2020 was established to celebrate all the graduates of 2020, from kindergarten through college, trade school, anyone who was planning to have a graduation where they crossed the stage, but they didn't. You can follow Instagrad 2020 on Instagram at Instagrad 2020, and please be sure to like the Facebook page Instagrad 2020. There's large major events each month on the 20th to celebrate graduates. Throughout the weeks for the rest of the year, there'll be prize giveaways, activities that are fun for all, and even a scholarship. Be sure to let all the graduates of 2020 know about Instagrad. You finished school at your pad, now you're an Instagrad. Visit the website at www.instagrad2020.net, where you'll find out more, and you can see the merchandise store where you can purchase items that will help support the scholarship drive and all the wonderful things that are happening this year. Again, be sure to follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for more. Thank you for listening to our sponsors. You're listening to Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. Today, I have two very distinguished young people as guests. We have Kimberly Gallendo, who is a community activist in the Latino community for the Inland Coalition of Immigrant Justice. My second guest is Christopher Williams, founder of Williamsville, a business dedicated to inspiring and informing communities across America. So let's pick back up where we left off. Kimberly, you were almost midstream in your response and in your discussion, and you guys were talking about all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter, and if someone says all lives matter when someone says Black Lives Matter, is that racist? Does it detract from it? And some people aren't racist and some people are. And I'm going to let you guys continue. I'll just say this: I believe firmly that all lives matter. I believe firmly that Black Lives Matter. And I've had people call me and text me in the middle of the night to chime in on debates or topics that were dividing them over that. And the way I explained it, and I don't even know if I came up with this, but I said it some years ago in a classroom, and now I see it circulating, is this: if our neighborhood is together and we're neighbors, and my house is burning, and I yell for help from my neighbors, my house is burning, and they say all houses matter, and they aren't giving attention to mine because theirs matter that much. And I'm thinking, yes, all houses do matter, but right now my house is burning. And if I don't get help with my house that's burning, surely that fire is going to spread to where your house is burning and all houses are burning. And do we have to have all houses burning for us to realize that all houses matter? Of course, all houses matter. Of course, all lives matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter. And Christopher, I really appreciate you both for the points you're bringing up, because you guys are talking about points that I wish our politicians, I wish our community activists as a whole could understand and really come to the table and differentiate between when someone's saying that something matters and something doesn't. It's the fact of they're people pleading for help. And it happens to be that all people need this help. But right now, this group is pleading for help. So I'm going to let you continue, Kimberly, and you guys can go on with your points.
Yeah. So, Christopher, I don't know if that answered your question on my statement that I said when someone says all lives matter when they're talking about Black Lives Matter. But I really hope that answered your statement. Well, my statement that I've made, and I've made myself clear about it. And then, yeah, so I'll pass it on to you. I don't know if you want to talk more about the police reform, because I know that that's something big that you did want to talk about.
Yeah, I want to say this in terms of this issue, and I want to make kind of a disclaimer, because I'm looking at it perhaps cynically, but definitely from a political point of view. Because first, I understand that for any significant changes to be had in this country, we have to do it through the changing of our laws. And fortunately or unfortunately, it comes through politics, period. And you know what's funny about this is that a lot of people are so apolitical, but they see what happened and they feel a sense of sadness and urgency. And I want to speak. You know what? I'm so glad I said that, because it reminds me of when this first became an issue. I believe it was Michael Brown when I first entered high school, and one of my friends, he doesn't not well versed in politics, but he's looking at what's going on, and he knows I am. So he sits me down. He's like, man, I don't know what to do. I believe that all lives matter, and I believe that Black lives matter, and I don't understand this debate. I don't understand why it's wrong for me to say this, or why it's wrong for me to say the other thing. And it seems as if one side's going to hate me or not. And that to me was a poignant conversation I had with him, because it started the wheels of processing the mentality of people who think differently than I do. And then I listen to the conservatives who talk about this issue. And you know what? They're not saying that, well, you know what? I don't think that blacks just go through any discrimination. They're not saying that. What many of these conservatives are saying is that first of all, they have a different mentality in terms of looking at this issue. First of all, we have to understand that many conservatives look at this through the prism of what conservative media feeds them. So when you talk about Black Lives Matter, if I say Black Lives Matter, there are, you talk to numbers, I don't know, but there are probably a majority of conservative people, let's just say a majority of people who voted for Donald Trump, who see, if they listen to, if you say Black Lives Matter, they're going to see that as a terrorist organization. You know why? Because some of the tactics used by the protesters, whether it's rioting and looting here, or whether it was jumping on stage, taking mics in 2016, or whether it was signs that they seen against cops. And so now they respond to that and say Blue Lives Matter. So when I look at it from a political perspective, and how do we make the issue of police reform a less risky issue for politicians who, let's face it, they're politicians. So they come from they're speaking to their base, and their base is looking at this from one issue. So no matter what's in their heart, they're going to say, well, you know what? I'm not for this because it's so divisive. And it's almost as if I'm supporting anti-police or the hatred for policing. I'm not going to get behind this. So my focus is, okay, and it's ingrained, how do we make this a less risky issue? Well, if we take this debate off the table and we change the mentality of liberals and we change the mentality of conservatives, that is a unifying factor, a unifying campaign. And then it allows police reform to be more pragmatic, more sensible, more reasonable for all politicians to get behind. And that's my issue. I'm seeing the roadblock. The roadblock is that there are so many Republicans in office right now whose base thinks that many of these protests that are going on, I've heard people say, oh, George Soros is funding a lot of these protests to try and sow division so that Donald Trump won't get elected. But you know what? If they were out there and we accepted, because I've seen some protests where Trump supporters come in and you're part of the problem, and they kick them out, and some people have gotten beaten up because they come to a protest trying to show unity, but they have on Trump attire, so you can't be here. So if we were to have a campaign, a march, where we had officers, where we had Trump supporters, Biden supporters, where we had people holding signs that said Blue Lives Matter next to people holding signs that said Black Lives Matter, next to people holding signs that said All Lives Matter, next to people holding signs that said no justice, no peace. And that unifying factor, making it, heck, PG, where you can ride your children in the strollers during this march because it's peaceful, because it's unifying, because it's all accepting. Guess what? It takes away the risk. It takes away these arguments, and I'm looking at it from a political perspective, and I understand you're looking at it, in my view, from a more idealistic perspective, because look, this is about race and we need to focus on that, and I get that. But my thing is, if police reform was to get passed, and again, I don't, really want to get into specifics because this is not the entire agenda. But for instance, if we were to make the whole issue around police reform less risky, and in that reform was implicit bias training for all officers and independent investigations for when questionable encounters happen, guess what? That helps the racial issue. It helps the racial issue. So if we have to, it's a campaign. To me, it's a campaign. And you know what? Martin Luther King, he talked a lot about race, but you know what? He also talked about the country and the unity of the country. And he talked about how segregation wasn't just hurting black people, it was hurting white people. It was hurting the country as a whole because we weren't living up to our promise. And that, I think that message gets across more. That I just do. And there are some people, because guess what, now we're looking at this issue, and there are a lot of people on the left who are saying defund the police. What? And you think we're going to actually make some change? You think that we're actually going to get Republicans to vote for this? And you're talking about defunding the police? Come on now. I mean, so some of these, we want to be idealistic, and I get that, but we have to go with the times here, and we have to get coalitions, and we have to think about it more strategically and less idealistically. And that's where I come at the issue. I'm not trying to avoid the very real racial impact of it and the significance of that, but I think if we make it in terms of the messaging more positive and about unity and about all people and all Americans being affected by this, then hey, I think we can actually make some progress. And that's just my mentality. I don't disagree with you. I just have a different way of thinking about it. And that's the only thing I think strategically it would be better for us to do it because we can actually achieve progress. And if that's the end goal, then we kind of have to lay down our idealism and hop on the train of pragmatism. That's just that in reason and in unity. And that's just my message. That's what I hope young people would do.
I think that as I'm listening, I hear less that there's a disagreement among you, but more of particular viewpoints and strategies to go about it. I think at the very beginning, Kimberly, you talked about the divisions within the Latino community, which I'm very much aware of. And I think even in that realm, the coalitions that you're working on to bring about change there, there are so many aspects that we can look at and so many areas that need to be improved. And we definitely don't have enough time in this show to go over them all. I hope that I can get you all back on here to talk more about this topic and even others that are more germane to what your daily life is or what your focus areas are. But I wanted to add into this because we're coming up on about an hour, and this has been great for me to hear that. I'm encouraged by what you both are offering. Kimberly, I would ask for you if you have a final response, not necessarily to Christopher, it can be, or just a final message that you want to send out there. I know that you're going to be engaged in the community over the coming weeks and months, and the folks that are listening in the audience, what is a message that you'd like to leave them with?
So a little bit of both. Christopher, just to answer some of your statements, I do understand where you're coming from, and I do think that police reform is a must, but I also think it's their lived experiences, their epistemology, like what they live in or how they grew up. If they see a race, they're going to be scared of it because maybe their parents grew up that way, and it's generational. It's like intergenerational trauma that is happening. And it'll keep happening if we don't talk about things like this in our family. I think change starts within the house, and if we call that idealistic, but I do think that change starts with the house, inside the home, talking about race, like your mother did to you when you were younger. Like, I have to talk about race with my nephew who is Black. And so we just have to talk about these things. And then when people say all lives matter, are they talking about the people who are currently detained inside ICE who are in, like, who the prison system too? Are they talking about those lives? Do those lives matter too? Or is it just the people who are walking around free? So if they're going to talk about all lives, we need to really be inclusive on every single life that's here in this nation too, the incarceration system as well. And that's also talking about the systematic impression that is caused by blacks in this country and the minorities. So if we're going to have this conversation of all lives matter, then we really need to be inclusive on every single life, because there's children in cages right now in Texas. Do those lives matter? Or because they're immigrants, they don't matter? Or is it just all lives matter? This is where it's kind of like, if you want to be inclusive with the all lives matter, then let's go for it, yo. Like, let's fucking go for it. Because if we're going to be inclusive and if we're going to be logical and thinking about this, then let's do it. Let's talk about the prison economy system here that's happening with the private prison, like Adelanto Detention Center, which is a private prison. And also other private prisons are in Louisiana too. And why? For the money. So if we're going to talk about these certain things, let's go beyond it. You want to talk about all life? Let's do it. I'm all for it. So, and then I feel like when you say,
go ahead, Kimberly.
When you say that the other side, like, you're painting these liberals or these protesters that are out there that don't want to stand next to a Trump supporter. Dude, my best friend is a Trump supporter. Shout out to Zach Davis. Yo, I talk to that guy every single day, and I can still hug him, and I can still have these conversations with him and see eye to eye. I do agree that we do need to listen, and that change just happened, and maybe it won't happen in our I hope it happens in our lifetime, but honestly, I don't know. I mean, it's tough to say. We do need police reform. We do. We really do, and people are fed up, and that's why the Black Lives Matter movement is so important, and we should not take away from them, because it is a valid movement. It really, really is. And it's not just about police brutality. It's about the systematic oppression, the prison economy system that literally houses black people. And we really need to talk about this land. This land was stolen, built by stolen people from Africa to make pretty by Latinos. So, yeah. You want to talk about all lives? Let's go for it.
Okay. You know, this conversation needs to continue. Again, I hope that I can get you guys back. We can set a date to continue this conversation, because you both have brought up excellent points and excellent topics, I think, that undergird a lot of the issues that we're having here in the United States and around the world, and they need to be explored. I'm most encouraged because I'm having this conversation with two young people who are community activists that have insights, that have researched and that have reasoned and that are engaging other people. That's what's most encouraging to me. So again, I hope that you both can come back. We're about over an hour. This has been a great forum. Can I get you on record to say that you'll both come back?
I definitely will.
All right, that's one.
Me too, Christopher.
How's that,
Kimberly? I love
Kimberly?
you, Kimberly. I love you.
I love you too, Chris. Honestly, mad love. This is good. Like, I don't take anything personal. I think this conversation needs to be had, and I honestly, this is really good. This is a good start for our community. Even if we just make change in Apple Valley or in the high desert, I'm all for it.
Large movements start with small steps. Large movements start with small steps. You've been listening to Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z while we chew the gum. We invite you to email if you have comments about this particular show or any of the other episodes. Email us at letschewthegum@gmail.com. Also find us on most podcast platforms. We look forward to you listening again. We want to say thank you to our guests, Christopher Williams, founder of Williamsville. And we want to also say thank you to Kimberly Gallendo, community activist for the Inland Coalition. We thank you so much. And as always, we always have
something for your